Mahajanpadas. Okay, so before Mahajanpadas, Janpadas are coming, right? And the Janpadas could be seen during later Vedic period. Because I just told you two words, when I was dictating about this polity, I told you about two words that could be frequently seen in the later Vedic period. And these were? Later Vedic period. सुनते नहीं है इसका मतलब आप लोग? No, no. Of course, I have started discussing about Janpada, so in that context I am saying only. Two words have been discussed which signify the importance of land during later Vedic period. Sorry? In fact, sorry? Okay, fine. No, I am not satisfied with that answer. यार ऐसे मत बोलो यार. The first term, Janpada itself. Earliest reference of Janpada could be seen in the later Vedic text. Right? What is the second term? Rashtra. Rashtra. Right? Which means state. Right? Getting my point? And the third also. That is Kshetrapati. It means somebody owning the land. Right? And I think to some point I have discussed about the ownership right also. Yesterday we started discussing about the ownership right, and we had a good discussion over the ownership right. Right? That people were owning the land or not. Right? So somehow we are not pretty sure that people were owning the land in the later Vedic period or not. I just told you that these terms are there. Right? These terms are there. And apart from that, definitely, आप कल की क्लास भूल जाएंगे तो कैसे चलेगा? I told you the references of donations are also there, and I just told you one story, right? The mother goddess herself is coming out and saying, no, you're not supposed to donate the land, right? It means that system was trying to come out, but it was discouraged, right? It was religiously discouraged, right? अभी ये ब्राह्मण का मुझे स्टेटस समझ में नहीं आता, उनको जमीन चाहिए भी और खुद ही लिख रहे हैं कि नहीं यार ऐसा गलत है. तो कुछ हो सकता है सेंसिबल ब्राह्मण्स रहे होंगे, नहीं क्या विक्रमजीत? हाँ, दाऊद इब्राहिम. I think what Bikramjit is saying, that is sufficient to make you understand the way the Brahminical literatures have been compiled or composed. I think this is the best example that you can get, right? So I think they have always their own interpretation, right? अब तुम ऐसे दाऊद गाउद का नाम लेके मेरी क्लास मत बंद करवाओ यार, ठीक है? These four terms we have already seen in later Vedic text, right? But somehow we are not pretty sure that to what extent these terms have become, a sort of consolidated idea. Because discussing these terms doesn't, approve that no, these ideas were being followed or practiced, right? And that is why it is slightly tough to discuss here that, even though, because, these ideas were there, but to what extent these are being followed cannot be said, right? But at least the only term that I told you, that is for the Rig Vedic polity. What was the term that I told you? That without writing that term, you cannot complete your answer? No. Stratification is there, that's true. And it's a compulsory word for the Rig Vedic polity. And in fact, even in the yesterday's class, we did discuss about stratification, right? But I just told you that this stratification, could have a liberal meaning also, right? It is not always very strict sort of division, right? And that is why somehow the state could not have emerged in a real sense during that particular period. Because whenever you talk about the state system, it is very much required. It is very much required, right? Without that you cannot talk. जब तक classes नहीं है तब तक state का क्या role है, ठीक है? तो stratification in any regard, maybe social, maybe political, maybe religious or social, right? Any sort of stratification should be there. Then only there is a role for the state, right? And normally what happened in the Western societies, it was class division, which got the concept of state. But some say in India that it was the social division. And just because of that reason, whenever you talk about the king, right? Do you know what is the most important function assigned to the king? What is the most important function assigned to the king as per the Brahminical text? As per the Brahminical text. क्या किया होगा? आप खुद सोच के बताएं. क्या बोलते होंगे कि राजा लड़ने वाला होता है, राजा एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन चलाने वाला होता है, हाँ? प्रोटेक्टर है, ठीक है? But is it the most important work or function assigned to him? No. The most important function which was assigned to the ruler or Rajan, as per the Brahminical text, let me clarify you, to maintain the social order. Whenever you read any text, you'll find that this is the assumption or this is the expectation from the from the ruler, that he is going to maintain the social order. And what exactly was the social order? Varna system. Varna system. अरे तुझे कल कहाँ चले गए थे? क्यों? आइज क्या प्रॉब्लम हो गई? अच्छा, इन्फेक्शन हो गया. Got the point, right? So somehow, okay. So that stratification could be of any type. That's a different thing. But stratification is required for the evolution of the state system, right? And in the early society, you'll find the basically the Varna division, right? And Varna division definitely, one of the motivator, must be one of the motivational factors for the emergence of state system. But you can't discard the idea of the social class division, right? I have already told you that class division was also there. But here, there should be a clarity, right? In a very, transparent way. That normally when the people in the Western people started writing the history of India, so the only part emphasized by them was the society. Most of the time they talked about the social problems, the social hierarchy, the social system. Whether the Western civilization always tried to find out their development in terms of class or economy. Whether the Indian development always has been gleaned or seen by the Western scholars in terms of caste and Varna and these kind of things. So initially that was the idea which was there. It was and as I can tell you that, or I just now I gave you the reference of the Brahminical text, that they are saying it is the Varna division, and in fact the rulers must try to secure this, that nobody is trying to nobody is trying to change his or her Varna, right, or trying to mobile from one Varna to the another Varna. So that is the most important task which was assigned to them. So I hope you can understand what kind of expectation was there from the king, right? But what did I tell you for the later Vedic society, that the Varna division is there, but I just told you a different interpretation of the Varna division, right? Instead of a division, it was more like cooperation and coordination, right? And that is why you can't assume it as a hierarchy. And the second thing I told you, that in most of the cases you'll find that the king tried to symbolize him as part of common men, right? Exactly, participating in agriculture, right? Or there were some other examples also there, like inclusion of the the lower caste people in the yagnas and the rituals, right? So somehow they tried to maintain that coordination among the society, among the society, that such kind of hierarchy should not be dominant in the society. And that is why I think that things were not, things hasn't come in a very clear way. And that is why what happens, right? You cannot find the evolution of the state system, right? Okay, fine, it happened. We crossed the later Vedic period. Now what? So we had the term Janpada, Rashtra, Kshetrapati, right? And okay, so you were suggesting about those kind of terms like Sangrahita and Bhagdut, right? So these are the few terms, but even though I have just told you that Bali was definitely in a better condition as compared to the previous phase, but Bali was not taxed at least, right? And that is why we can say ki the term, the question that exactly I ask you, that what term, without what term you cannot complete the political aspect of the Vedic society, that is later Vedic society, that is transition. I just told you that it is the transitional phase of the society where the society is taking a turn, right, or moving towards, a next sort of change, and this particular phase has played very important role. And that is why the term, what I told you in the beginning only, always try to learn the history in terms of continuity and changes, right? So there are few elements which continued, and there are few elements which changed from the Rig Veda, and few elements of the later Vedic period is now going to change in the Mahajanpada period, right? So okay, fine. So Mahajanpada period. So now if it is about Mahajanpada period, so I told you that one thing that is pretty sure, that the land has become important now, right? So, and that importance increased in the Mahajanpada period. Normally this is the period, this is the age has been assumed for Mahajanpada period, right? Well, if we need to discuss about the Mahajanpada period, so let us first talk about changes, right? What were the changes took place in Mahajanpada period? That is important to understand first, right? So you just tell me what kind of changes might have taken place in use of iron. Okay. Talk about some broader changes. Sorry? These are the minor changes. So the first biggest change is formation of state. Second, स्टेट बात कर लिया, हम बड़ी बात से छोटी बात पे आएंगे, ठीक है? सेकंड, छोटी बातें मत बताए, हाँ? Second, urbanization. And third, इसका मतलब है कि आप लोग पिछली क्लास को सुनते नहीं ध्यान से. मैं जाते जाते यही बात बोल के गया था. When I was leaving class, this is what I discussed in the class and then I left. Again, you are just talking about the minor things. Once I said state, I discussed about many things. Now I'll go to that. Now definitely I'll discuss that, right? But here I'm just talking about the broad transformations which took place, or the changes which took place during this particular period.
New religions.
Didn't I tell you this? Religious revolution. Right? You all agree with this? Any other change? Huh? Yeah. What else? Tell me. स्कूल वाली हालत बना दी है आप लोग. छुट्टी हो गई, उसके बाद बस बस्ता समेटना है. That is part of state system only. छुट्टी होने के बाद टीचर क्या बोलना इस पे ध्यान थोड़ी है, बस्ता जल्दी जल्दी किताबें डालनी है ऐसे मस्ता और लेके बाहर भागना है, फिर ऐसे मत करो यार, ठीक है. ओके फाइन. So these three changes, these are the broad changes, right? And every other changes that you people are discussing apart, these are part of this only, right? So instead of starting it from the formation of state, let us start it from the second urbanization, right? Let us start it from second urbanization. So yes, whenever you talk about urbanization, so I just told you the same structure that we are going to fit everywhere. I already told you one structure about urbanization, right? So yes, what structure that I told you, if it is about urbanization, I just told you a few things. The first, what else?
Metals, coins, metals, metal coins, population.
State societies?
Class,
Very good. Class?
class consciousness, script, monuments,
Instead of monuments, I am writing artistic expression, right? Okay, few are still left, right? I'll discuss it later on, right? Matlab, once we are done with this, we'll move to the next other. Like metal was also there, and more or less this will be covered here only, right? So, anyways, so let us begin with the first, right? Surplus, right? If it is about surplus, right? So first we need to prove one thing, कि they had a surplus or not, right? So this is one of the most important question, that in the ratio in which the surplus is increasing, the society is absorbing other changes, right? So the amount of surplus was very much required, right? And that is why this became one of the most important question, right? This became one of the most important question that must be discussed here also, right? To what extent they had surplus, right? So if we need to solve this particular issue, that to what extent they had surplus, right? So we need to analyze some of the facts, right? Whenever you are talking about this Mahajanpada period, so the another land which became important, that was the lower Gangetic plains, right? And it's a gradual movement that you might have noticed that they started from the sub-Sindhava land and gradually they are moving towards the east, right? And I think you do understand the reason because of what they got attracted towards east. That's very simple, that it was about the suitability of the land for agriculture, right? The land was better and they realized this fact, and it is not happening that thus on a day, they decided to shift from this region to that region और बोरा बस्तर उठाया और उस रीजन में चले गए. It's a gradual shifting, right? So they have come to Allahabad. After Allahabad, they thought that that area is having better rainfall, right? So what they did actually, let us move towards that side. So gradually or slightly they moved towards east. Then they realized कि अच्छा उधर और बेहतर है इसकी तरफ, तो थोड़ा सा उधर चले गए. So it's a sort of gradual shift. But ultimately we can say, and that is why whenever we do talk about the second urbanization or the Mahajanpada period, we talk about 6th and 5th century BC. So it's a transformation which took place in last 500 years. Last 2 to 300 years, right? So at least 2 to 300 years, took for this transformation. And now what is happening? Because of that, they could have produced a huge amount of surplus. And that is why the first thing that we need to discuss whenever we need to talk about the surplus. So we need to discuss about the LGP, lower Gangetic plains, right? And lower Gangetic plains had certain features, right? So what were the, things, or what were the positive things which were there in the lower Gangetic plain? So first was about fertile soil, right? So what kind of fertile soil they had? Alluvial soil, right? आप सबको पता है कि नदी जो है, I mean whenever the river is flowing, so when they could not carry those stuff, right, which they carrying from the from their beginning, right, they used to deposit it on the banks, right, or it is being deposited with the help of the floods also. Once the river is coming out with a full force, right, or the water is coming out of with a full force and then goes to the plain area, right, and when the water is coming back to the river, right, then they used to leave those stuff, and somehow this is supposed to be the most fertile soil in geography or in in any region, right. So somehow they had a fertile region, right. And the second, अभी इतनी ज्योग्राफी तो आप लोग पढ़ ही चुके होंगे. इंडिया का रेनफॉल पैटर्न कैसा है? फ्रॉम द ईस्ट टू वेस्ट, राइट, एंड यू नो दैट मेघालय इज द एरिया विच एक्सपीरियंस, या अभी है नहीं चेहरा मासेनराम, एंड यू आर फ्रॉम मणिपुर, ओके. सो आई थिंक देयर इज गुड डिफरेंस बिटवीन मेघालय एंड मणिपुर, not much, right. So Meghalaya is the area which is having maximum rainfall, and then West Bengal, right, and then it is coming to Bihar region, right. So Bihar and the eastern UP are definitely those regions where the rainfall is very good as compared to the the upper Gangetic plain and the sub-Sindhava land, right. So somehow the rainfall is also good. So there was no as such controversy regarding this, but the real controversy is coming with the third point, and that is iron, right. So I think you might have seen, I think this is written in your syllabus also, right. So the controversy is regarding iron. What kind of controversy it is?
We find the evidence of iron in Ayas and what we find in railway.
Fine.
And then
What he is trying to say that we do have evidences of iron even in the later Vedic period. And I never denied this idea that the Vedic people were using iron. In fact, once we have discussed about sword, right, the sword were made of iron only, right. They had limited access to iron, but they were aware of iron, right. And if they were aware of iron, it means that they must be looking for more sources of iron in this country, right. And they kept on hunting these kind of things, and gradually they reached to the Bihar area. And at the south, in the south of Bihar, there is an area called Jharkhand, right. And in Jharkhand, you will find numbers of iron mines. They access to the iron, right. And now the Marxist historians always try to find a great role of iron in the Mahajanpadas period. And for them, whatever the changes I discussed, the three major changes, for all these, iron was responsible, right. How come?
So formation of state के लिए iron जरूरत होता है ताकि उससे सरप्लस भी बढ़ेगा सर, एग्रीकल्चर में टूल्स जो बनेंगे.
आयरन से सरप्लस कैसे बढ़ता है?
सर एग्रीकल्चर के लिए जब हम टूल्स बनाएंगे, आयरन टूल्स बनाएंगे, तो उनसे सर एग्रीकल्चर सर ये साल में यूज होगा, दूसरा वॉर में यूज होगा, वॉरफेयर आल्सो सर वेपन्स.
ओके, ठीक है. Definitely we have started various kind of tools of iron, right, but the most important tool is plow, right, because with the help of this plowshare, right, now it had huge impact over agriculture. How come? I have already told you that whenever you are using the bulky stuff while making the plowshare, it is getting deeper into the earth, right, and as much as deeper it is getting into the earth, that is better for the agriculture. So now they learned how to make the iron plowshare, right, and then they started cultivating the land. And I think this is the compulsion, because of what they needed the bullocks also to run their agriculture, right, because if it is getting deeper, right, of course you can understand that you can't pull it. Initially the male were pulling the wooden plowshare, and it was easy also. इतना भारी नहीं होता था, जमीन के इतना नीचे नहीं जाता तो उसको खींचना मुश्किल नहीं है, ठीक है. बट अभी जब वुडन आयरन प्लोशेयर लेके आए, तभी अभी जमीन के नीचे ज्यादा जा रहा है, ठीक है. एंड नाउ इट वाज नॉट इवन पॉसिबल फॉर द मेल्स 2 or 4 or 6 males, right, to pull it. And that is where they started using the bullocks or the bulls for pulling it, right. And somehow that marked the beginning of the creation of huge surplus. Definitely they made certain other tools also, such as sickle, such as hoe, axe, and some other things, right. So the one direct utility of this particular thing was making the iron plowshare. But the Marxist people, such as R.S. Sharma is the most dominant historian who has, given that much weightage, and this debate actually started only after 1960 when D.D. Kosambi has come, and they, D.D. Kosambi gave a new direction to the Indian history writing. हम पहले भी मैंने बताया आपको, ठीक है? And then R.S. Sharma picked up the issue from there, and they started writing the Marxist history. And as I am telling you, okay, it was a different interpretation which was given by him, right? And then what happens, right? Then they are saying that it is not only about that. There was another use of iron, and without that it was not possible. And what kind of use it had? They said that, look, if area is fertile, right? If the area is having good rainfall, so do you think that this area would be clear? Of course, this area would be heavily forested, right? And if that area is heavily forested, or if you are talking about such kind of land, right? So normally the trunks of the trees are thicker, right? जहाँ पे बहुत ज़्यादा नहीं होता, बारिश बहुत ज़्यादा होती है, तो तना जो है, ट्रंक जो है ट्री का, वो नॉर्मली मोटा होता है. So far what happened, they did not face such kind of trees, right? And that is why what they are saying, it was easy for them to cut it, right? With the help of the stone tools or some other tools, right? They could cut it. But now as they have reached to an area where the thick, trees were having thick trunk, and because of what they could not cut it with the help of the stone tools, right? And that is why they are saying that iron X was another important tool which was made by them, and without that iron X it was not possible to make the area, right? Make the area cultivable. Got the point, right? So that is why these people have highly emphasized on the role of iron, right? And they are saying that this iron played very important role for making this area cultivable, the first thing, and the second they are saying it was good for the agriculture, right? And that is why somehow they could generate huge amount of surplus. And if the surplus is there, definitely there might be certain sources of the surplus, during this particular period. So from the beginning only, you will find one thing, that now the society has gone through a complete transformation in terms of economy, because as I told you that this is the second economy, urbanization in India. So because of that, it could be very easily assumed that this society had a huge amount of surplus. But before I come to the other aspects, let me tell you some more thing about that, iron. So as I told you that some people have very or outrightly accepted the role of iron in the agriculture, right? But some people, such as Makhan Lal and all, they did not accept the role of iron in agriculture, right? And they are also presenting some valid argument for that. Have you got any idea for those arguments? What kind of arguments might have been given by them? NCERT में कुछ नहीं लिखा है, नहीं लिखा. NCERT किसने लिखा है? तो उसका आइडिया तो मैंने बता दिया आपको. 2003 के बाद एनसीईआरटी किसने लिखी है? नहीं, नहीं, सॉरी, माखन लाल. Makhan Lal is writing the, do you know Makhan Lal? No. Right? The Makhan Lal has written the new NCERT, right? The NCERT which started, which was being taught after 2003, right? Makhan Lal is saying a different thing. They are saying, look, the way the Marxist people are saying, they completely cut down the trees, the Aryans, right? Not about, Aryans, because by that time you know about that intermixing of both the communities, right? So you can't say it was all about Aryans. So first they are saying, there are few things, what they are saying. The first, that this area was not inhabited before. Was it? I have already told you, during the Neolithic period, the Mirzapur area was one of the most important zone for the Neolithic period, right? So it means that some people were already there, right? What is the second thing he is saying? That the area was not deforested or cut down completely by this, in this particular period, 6th and 5th century BC. They are saying that agriculture was already being practiced. Maybe they would have extended the agriculture to some extent. But for extending it to some extent, you don't need to cut the whole trees of that area. The third thing he is saying that this area became deforested only during the colonial rule. Only during the colonial rule. Reason? Development किस तरीके का? रेलवे ट्रैक. वो कहते हैं रेलवे ट्रैक बिछाना था उनको, तब जो 18-19 सेंचुरी में काटा. And something which is more important than that, he is saying कि just by using the iron axe, it is not necessary that you can clear the land. There was another system of clearing the land, fire, right? And in fact, he is saying that traditionally this system was there, and even the Neolithic people were also aware of this system, right? So even they could also clear the land. Now the question is there, कि how come they would have, we could have, given emphasis to the Aryan people, to the people, those who are coming, to this region very late, around 6th and 5th century BC, they were responsible for clearing the land, right? So look, both the ideas are valid. We cannot come to any conclusion, right? But I think the Marxist idea which has been given seems to be more logical, right? That yes, there might be a sort of connection. But yes, at the same time you have to accept the way they have highlighted this, right? It was not like that also. For them, for the Marxist historians, everything happened here because of iron. But the nationalists are saying, or that group is saying, right, look, changes definitely have taken place, right, but definitely not because of iron. So you can't emphasize a lot on the iron, right? Maybe other factors such as the Neolithic people, those who are living in this Mirzapur area, right, definitely their agricultural pattern was less developed as compared to the people, those who are migrating from the western side, right, because they were more, they were advanced society, right. They were actually belonging to advanced society, and as a result of that, what happened, that these people have developed many technologies in agriculture, whether the Neolithic agriculture was not developed to that extent, right. And that is why the people, they have migrated to this region, and they had this skill that they could generate a huge amount of surplus, but somehow they are not ready to accept that much important role played by iron. But somehow, what is reality? That surplus was created, right? That's the most important fact that we need to remember, right? So what are the result of the surplus? Of course, I told you, there were so many things that could be seen, right? So once surplus is there, so the first thing which is coming, that is the secondary economic activities, right? Now, there might be so many things through which we can discuss about the secondary economic activities. But very frankly, let us talk about few limited sources through which you can discuss about the secondary economic activities, such as Buddhist literature. Okay, fine. हो गया, बुद्धिस्ट जैन एक ही है. और बताइए, कुछ नहीं पता. अर्थशास्त्र, right? Arthashastra is giving a long list of such kind of craft practices in India, right? And the क्या फर्क पड़ता है? महाजनपद पीरियड कब से कब तक है? 5th सेंचुरी तक, और उसके बाद मौर्यंस तो 3rd सेंचुरी में आते हैं. सो बेसिकली डोंट अप्लाई द साइंस वाला आइडिया इनटू हिस्ट्री, राइट? ऐसा नहीं होता है. मतलब इट्स अ सॉर्ट ऑफ what is we are discussing about centuries, and I just told you that the changes. Do you think that somewhere in the 5th century BC one craft started, and by the time of Arthashastra it finished? That is what I am saying, right? If Arthashastra has discussed or given a long list of the trades and the specialization in craft, so maybe these were even exercised before that, right? So Arthashastra is another text, and Kam Sutra. Kam Sutra is also giving a long list of the such kind of craft practices. So all such texts are there, and in fact you do know, and of course we cannot avoid the most important one, Panini, Ashtadhyayi, right? So Ashtadhyayi is also giving a list of such kind of craft practices. That's a book on medical science. So here we are just talking about the books which did discuss about the craft practices or the specialization, right? So what did I tell you? That they have right? So what did I tell you? that they have referred about number, or these books have referred about numbers of such kind of craft practices. And mind you, can you imagine that what number that might have referred, that how many different sort of craft were being practiced during this particular period? Can you imagine? Can you imagine? No? एक रफ आइडिया 100. अभी 100 गिना दोगे? $64 various crafts. That number varied. Very frankly, I am telling you, but that is the maximum number that we do find. अगर 30-35 भी क्राफ्ट अलग है, स्पेशलाइज है, तो बहुत बड़ी बात होती है, ठीक है. एंड somehow they have discussed about the 64 various kind of craft practices, and somehow it does tell us about the importance of the secondary economic activities, right? Now the thing is that if so much secondary economic activities were there in practice, so it means that they must be having a good trade and commerce, right? And in fact, right, this is the earliest period in India where they have started using the coins, right? So the earliest used coins by them was punch marked coins, right? It's a very simple type of coins, right? Silver coin, these were the silver coins, right? And they used to put a sort of stamp over the coins, right? And that is why it is called as punch mark. Sometimes they were making hill, sometimes fist, sometimes the humped bull, right? So very simple sort of symbols were there at the top of the ear. And these coins were very sort of I mean, they are not having any proper shape as such, right? They were in most of the cases you'll find that they were without shapes, right? Shape, by shape, exactly what I mean. What do I mean? They did not have this technology of melting the metals, right? They were not melting the metal. मेटल को दूसरे तरीके से भी हम बना सकते हैं. कैसे बना सकते हैं यार? हम उसको कैसे करें? सॉरी, कैसे? बो और एरो यूर से. मैंने कब कहा कि बो एरो बनता है? Exactly. I have just told you, right? Okay, you remember. Sorry? Exactly. So it was basically, I hope you remember that, it was they used to just hit it with some heavy stuff, and just by making the just by doing that process, they used to get it in a flat shape, right? And they used to cut it from the side to get the proper weight of the So that is what known as punch mark coin. So okay, if they have started using the punch mark coin, it means that it shows the advanced status of the economy of that period, right? So somehow we do know that economy was advanced, right? And if economy was advanced, different kind of craft practices were there. So it means that there was a trade and commerce also, right? And I hope you remember some of the popular paths during the Mahajanpada period, such as Uttarapath, connecting Takshashila to Patliputra. That is known as Uttarapath. A route which was connecting Uttarapath to Ujjain, right? That was known as, and even Asmak to Dakshinapath, right? So these were the popular routes being used by them, right? Uttarapath and Dakshinapath, right? So these were the popular routes used by them, by the people. And somehow we do have references where the people were coming from the northwestern side actually to Indian land, right? And in fact, this, immediately after this period, look, when I say Mahajanpada period, so you must imagine a period from the 5th century or 6th century BCE to beginning of the Christian era, right? Or even after that, 2nd century AD. So that period is known for the period of second urbanization. So once I am discussing second urbanization, so I am not talking about 6th and 5th century BC. I am just covering the whole part. So I hope you remember the post-Mauryan rulers. Got the point or not? Right. I am discussing about, because Kusanas are also part of the second urbanization. And in fact, to some extent, Guptas were also part of the second urbanization. Only after the Guptas, the second urbanization declined. And then we do find that there was some problems started coming in ruralization and self-sufficient economy and some other things are coming. But before that, it was part of the second urbanization. So if, we'll discuss about that period. So I hope you must be knowing about this Kusana period. Right? So what exactly happened during this Kusana period? Just a second, I'm coming. राम है क्या? कहाँ चला जाता है? रमेश, एक कॉफ़ी ला दो हमको, पैसा दे देना इसमें, है पैसा हमसे ले लेना। ठीक है. So if we'll discuss about the Kusana period, so you do know about various kind of coins, right? Gold coin, silver coins, copper coins, bronze coins, right? और सातवाहन तो उससे भी आगे चले जाते हैं. They have started using the lead and protein coins as well, right? So somehow, I hope you remember while discussing the coins, I might have told you that if you find the varieties of coins, it means the economy was no. If you find the varieties of coin, economy was prosperous.
The most prosperous was in Satavahana time.
Economy was prosperous. How come? Because if you find, sorry, नहीं आता. Gold coins are always, suppose you have a gold coin, right? And there is no silver coin and bronze coin and copper coin, and you just came out from your house taking the gold coin. What will you do of that gold coin? बताया तो था एग्जाम्पल मैंने. 2000 का नोट है और 500 का नोट है नहीं. क्या करोगे? मार्केट में बस वही लेके घूमते रहोगे, ठीक है? और जाओगे वो कुछ खाने के लिए तो मार के भगा देगा, बोलेगा 2000 का नोट दिखाने आए हो, ठीक है, राइट? वो केला वाला जो है ऐड देखा है ना, पेटीएम वाला जो है, ठीक है, पेटीएम या जो भी है, भीम ऐप आजकल तो अलग अलग तरीके के आ गए, ठीक है? सो if Gusanas or the Indo-Greeks, Sakas and others, right, they have started using the coins of different values, right? So of course it shows the the prosperous status of the economy, right? And of course during that particular period, you know about the Silk Route which was connecting China to Central Asia, right? And if China was connected to Central Asia, then Uttarapath was connected to Silk Route, right? So the traders were coming to this region also, right? And in fact, the northwestern part of India got a sort of peaceful atmosphere during this particular period, and which somehow facilitated the development of trade and commerce, specifically with the Central Asia. They all started coming to this region, right? They settled down here, and that is the period you will find that this became one of the popular hub of the traders and commerce, and that is why you find that this area was following Buddhism and Jainism. More specifically Buddhism. अफगानिस्तान में कभी आप इमेजिन करते हैं बुद्धिज्म था वहाँ पे, that was the most dominant religion in Afghanistan, right? It was only after the coming of Muslims somewhere around 12th century they had to leave this place, right? So then Muslim traders started coming to this region, right? And then the Buddhists had to leave. So from the beginning of the Christian era till the 12th century AD, what happened? They all were actually the Buddhist people, and some Hindus were also there. In fact, the dynasties that you must be reading in the early medieval and medieval period, these all were Hindus dynasties. Sahi, Jaipal, Anangpal, these were the rulers actually, right? And Hindus basically migrated from here to Kashmir only, and that is where Kashmir also will find a good number of Hindu people, right? So somehow, anyways, this was a late development, but somehow I hope you are getting my point that region is definitely known for its flourished trade and commerce, right? So that idea cannot be neglected. Yes, they had a very flourished trade and commerce, right? Specialization of craft and numbers of crafts such as chariot making and many other crafts, right? Metallurgy and then carpentry and then cobblers and various kind of crafts, right? Could be seen during this particular period, and of course it promoted the trade and commerce, and most importantly textile, right? I'm missing it, textile, right? So textile was one of the most important commodity which happened, right? Now after this, state society is there. I'm not discussing the state society right now. Next is the class structure, right? Sorry? Well, that might be a controversial issue, right? That might be a controversial issue, right? What is basically a controversial issue that I'm discussing here. Okay, what did I tell you? Class, right? So once you say about class, right? So I have already told you that class is this, dominantly class is an economic term, right? That you do understand. So whenever you talk about class, it means ki definitely the people were conscious for their property and their belongings, right? It means ki there was a concept of private property, right? So now the idea is that ki how do we prove, how can we prove that they had a notion of private property, right? So look, the idea of private property is something which is very tough to be proved, right? Normally we don't have evidences for this period. The earliest writing that we do find, that is the Buddhist writings, right? That is also starting somewhere around 4th or 5th century BCE, and after that we find some of the Sanskrit writings. So definitely after 5th century BC we do find numbers of writings, specifically the Buddhist writing, and this is the evidence that we are supposed to with the help of this we need to prove that was there any concept of private property or not, right? But before I come to those kind of things, let me tell you about few terms which were very frequently seen during this particular period, such as Gehapati. Have you ever heard this term, Gehapati? Owner of the? It was, that term has been referred for the people, those who used to own huge amount of land. Gehapati, right? What else apart from Gehapati? Acha, one very important concept I missed to discuss, in trade and commerce and craft production. What is that? Guild, Sreni. Guild and Sreni, right? Okay, I'll come to guild and Sreni. Guild or Sreni. If I started discussing about the class. So I just told you that if it is about class, so there are few things which are very important and that we need to understand. So there, the first thing I told you about Gehapati, and the second thing, there's one more term that is known as Seti, right? So Seti is the another term which was basically which symbolized the merchant person, right? Not class, the merchant individual, right? The person who has gained or who has earned huge amount of money with the help of trade and commerce and business, right? So this is the another term. So what is the significance of these terms like guilds and Srenis and Gehapatis? So of course it denoted about the individual who has earned huge amount of money or property because of his business and agriculture. At the same time, I hope you can understand this point. At the same time, you must remember one more thing. In India, sometimes we have just tried to cover up the class differences in the name of caste differences or the Varna differences. Sometimes we have tried to cover up the class differences with the Varna differences. Normally this pattern you might have seen that the Brahmanas and the Kshatriyas are the richer section of the society. The Vaisyas were slightly less than the Brahmanas and the Kshatriyas, and the Sudras was definitely the most deprived class, right? And I think you understand that this is the social hierarchy. Got my point or not? So what kind of hierarchy could be seen in economy, right? The same kind of hierarchy even could be seen in society, and that is where the economic hierarchy was overwhelmed by social hierarchy, right? Matlab that was covered by the social hierarchy. So Brahmanas, Vaisya, Kshatriyas, Vaisyas and Sudras, right? And now the same kind of economic disparities are also there. I mean, in the same way, you'll find the economic disparity. So Sudras were the most deprived class, Vaisyas were definitely slightly powerful class, and Brahmanas and Kshatriyas, I cannot say who were the most powerful. In fact, maybe possible that Kshatriyas were more powerful in terms of money. But even though, and in fact, I think this is the reason because of what we'll find a interchanging of the ideas. In some of the texts, you'll find that the Kshatriyas have been given the first position, where in some of the texts or most of the texts, Brahmanas have been given the first position. So maybe possible because of what, there was a sort of such kind of changing that very frequently could be noticed in the the texts written during that particular period. But somehow, that idea is pretty sure that they had a notion of class. And in fact, there are lots of examples which talked about the donation of the land. There are lots of examples which talked about the donation of the land. Thank you, Arun. ठीक है, अभी क्वेश्चन ये है कि लैंड डोनेट कैसे कर सकते हैं. That's a big question. If you are donating the land, it means I'm owning the land, right? So in fact, during the time of Buddhism, you might have numbers of cases, such cases of donations, right? Numbers of such cases of donations. Like, of course, the Vaisya community or the Kshatriya community, koi guha daan kar raha hai. Somebody is donating the cave, somebody is donating land, somebody is donating some other thing. It is all about donations only. Because whenever you do talk about the monasteries, right? The monasteries and the donations were running parallel. I hope you got my point, right? So somehow you can find the similarities between these two, right? The donations, if the donations were there, and in fact a single Buddhist text can lie, but all the Buddhist texts cannot lie, right? And of course the success of monastery, as I told you, was depending over the donations, right? So if it is, I mean to say, it was depending over this, donations, it means that there was some concept of private ownership. So if the ownership, if the concept of private ownership is there, so definitely it meant a sort of class differences, right? So it means that during the 6th and 5th century BC, with the beginning of the 6th and 5th century BC, because if all these people that I am talking about in terms of donations, right, they were contemporary to Buddha. Even Buddha himself was donated huge amount of land and gardens and the orchards and some other thing, right? Kings were also donating. Look, so if it is about king, so it's a different thing. Right? If it is about king, it's a different thing, because king was the whole and soul of that, that region. But even though we don't find the evidences of the land donations by the king even in the previous period, get my point? It means that the king did not have this right to donate the land, and that is why he could not have donated, right? So we don't know to what extent the king got the rights to donate the land during this particular period, or it might be possible that king is giving something to anyone from his personal belonging. I hope you remember the Khalisa land. याद है Khalisa land? नहीं, medieval हमने किया नहीं अभी, but I hope you must be knowing about that Khalisa. Khalisa land नहीं पढ़ा कोई? कभी एनसीईआरटी नहीं पढ़ी medieval वाले? नहीं, साथ ही साथ पढ़ रहे हैं. अच्छा, very good. नहीं, अच्छा है तो इसमें तो मैं कुछ नहीं बोल सकता हूँ. ठीक है. Khalisa was that land which was directly under the control of the Sultan or Badshah, right? The income which was coming from the Khalisa land was directly going to the ruler. It is a medieval phenomena, right? But the same kind of phenomena might be, because definitely the court also had certain expenditure, the palace also had certain expenditure. During the time of Mughal, you will find less amount of land under Khalisa. During the time of Alauddin Khilji, you will find a huge amount of land under Khalisa, right? Because for him, the expenditure, for his expenditure was greater than any other, because he had to maintain a huge standing army, that to his own army. He was not dependent over the iqtidars. So I think the king also must be having his own, land. And maybe possible that the king was donating something to the I mean to say the monasteries or the Buddhism from his own land, right? But somehow if the donation is there, it means private property was there, and if private property is there, so I think there should not be any doubt that the concept of class was also existing in society. And whenever the concept of class is there in the society, the another term should definitely be there, that is क्लास है तो classes. Yes, if the class is there, classes are there. More or less, if any sort of stratification is there, classes are there. And mind you, religious stratifications are more, religious stratifications are like more mental hegemony, right? Try to get my point. You can't very clearly oppose the religious stratification or the religious subjugation, right? Because if you are opposing from your caste only, from your community only, people could have opposed you. कैसा अधर्मी आदमी है, ये बोलते हैं ना. सदगति की कहानी तो सुनाई होगी ना, सदगति प्रेमचंद की सुनाया है. That mental hegemony, Brahman, and the people from his own community are saying ki what is Sadgati, Hariya got. So you can't challenge such kind of things, right? You cannot challenge such kind of things, right? And that is why what is happening, that what when you talk about the class, so the class is not like caste, right? So if you are opposing, trying to oppose the class sort of exploitation, so the people from your community are definitely helping you. वहाँ पे वो mental hegemony काम नहीं करती है जैसा कि यहाँ कर रही है. Getting my point or not, right? You didn't get it? Okay, fine. So what did I tell you? That so definitely the class structure was existing in that society, and in fact such kind of land donations and so many various other is there. Land donations we will discuss separately, and that will discuss while ending the Gupta period, right? Because there the land donation is becoming important, and there we need to discuss about this concept. And yesterday also I discussed briefly about this land donation, that yes, what kind of controversies are there. But so far it is not only about that, because during the time of Mauryans you'll find that Arthashastra is writing in a way that they'll donate if the land which is not which is basically a barren land, right, that land should be donated to the Sudras, because the Sudras can cultivate it, right? And Sudras, so if they are donating the land to the Sudra, it means ki that concept of donation is there, right? So somehow all such kind of ideas are there, and because of what we can say one thing, that yes, the concept of private ownership has come, the first thing, and because of what, the class creation, the concept of class has come, right? And when once you talk about the class society, the tensions, the classes are quite obvious, and as a result of that you find that yes, numbers of such classes are there. Okay, fine, I'll come to that point again later on, right? Then population, instead of I think one day I discussed about this rice consuming societies. I told you that normally it's a common pattern that the societies which are consuming rice, they had the tendency of the population growth, right? So yes. So okay, fine. And then the next is scripts, right? So if it is about script, right? So you do know that you have lots of example of the scripts, right? So the history begins with Brahmi, right? And then multiple language of within the Brahmi. So Prakrit is there, Pali is there, Ardhamagadhi is there, right? And then you'll find that from Brahmi many other languages also originated, right? And so many languages you can talk about later on, like Upper Bhansa is there, Saurseni is there, Marathi is there, right? And then later on we'll find the evolution of or the birth of some other languages. But this period is definitely known for so many scripts, and by the time of Gupta, Sanskrit also became one of the dominant languages in Indian society, and which was normally being used by the royal communities, right, or the educated communities, right? But that is also the reality of that, right? So more or less you find the presence of all such kind of things during the second urbanization, right? But once you talk about the second urbanization, so let us try to find out the possibilities of the questions in this particular structure. Got my point? What are the important areas from where they can frame a question, right? Whenever you are writing any answer for the Mahajanpada period, the idea of surplus has to be there, right? Without surplus you cannot complete any of the answers, right? So always keep in mind, and mind you, these keywords are the most important idea which can get you the marks, right? So whenever you are writing or attempting any answer from the Mahajanpada period, why did I discuss all the terms again? Because these terms are actually, evaluator are trying to find out those terms. Has he written about surplus? Has he written about the craft practices or the specialization of craft? Has he written about the class, script, art and state societies? Okay, art was left, right? So what, for art we have multiple of the things to be discussed, right? This is the period which marked the beginning of the art and culture, right? So it is beginning the stupa art, right? And the various forms of sculpture art, the palace or the palaces, right? Sculptures, right? So there were so many things that could be seen during this particular period. And I have already told you that whenever you find the state societies, they are always patronizing such kind of things. Why? Because it is somehow related to their glory. Later on it is becoming a sort of practice, because till very late period you will find that the arts were being practiced not for the common people. It was always being practiced for the ruling classes or the ruling elites, right? So the art is being practiced for them, the ruling practice, and that continued till the Mughal period. Only after this 19th century you will find that the art came out from this court. Art came out from the court and people have started practicing the art for the common people, right? And that is why, as I told you, that all such features you need to remember. But as the second thing I told you, that what are the possibilities of the questions, right? So surplus is definitely important, right? And in fact, as I told you, that in most of the answer that you are writing for this period, you need to mention about the surplus, right? But while writing about the surplus, you need to remember that iron, debate, important question, right? What else? They can ask a question directly on the secondary economic activities. Now try to get my point. This is a factual question. Art and craft, if they are asking anything about that art and craft, craft practices and trade and commerce, it's a factual question. There you need to prove, you need to write about the sources of the crafts, right? Like the way I discuss about the sources like Kam Sutra, the Buddhist texts, the Jatkas, and Arthasastra, Kam Sutra, right? So these are the texts that you need to discuss. And in the just by taking the support of such kind of thing, it will discuss about these two things. What other evidences do you have? But any answer that you are writing for this particular thing, right? You need to present, you need to write, or you need to present first the conceptual backup. If you discuss about suppose there is a very simple question that has been asked, and that is what marking the difference in the marks actually. I am telling you very frankly. They have asked that discuss the economy of the 6th century BC. What rest of the people are doing? They start discussing about the agriculture, they start discussing about the various craft practices, and they are writing about the trade and commerce. They completed the answer. Instead of giving much emphasis on this thing, try to get my point. Instead of giving much emphasis to this thing, you need to begin your answer with the surplus. That if the society had the surplus, so there is a very normal outcome of this, the specialization of craft, right? Which ultimately leads to the trade and commerce, right? So you need to develop the answer in that way. हम खूब डिस्कस करते हैं इसको कि जो है ये लोग ये बनाते थे, आपको लगा ये आंसर तो बढ़िया लिखा है, इसमें से 15 में तो कम से कम जो है 9 तो मिल जाएगा, ठीक है, मिलेगा कितना आपको 5 या 4, because they were not looking for those factual information, they were looking for the conceptual information. So instead of writing, so there are two things might be important here: the sources, to what extent you are referring the sources to study about the secondary economic activities, and the second, how much conceptually you have presented your answer, right? So this is a factual question that you can find in the notes also, right? And somehow you have to just present the facts that will begin with the surplus only, right? So that is one important question. State society, I am missing.
So while answering the secondary economic activity, we need to always mention the sources.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Even in craft practices and trade and commerce, sources should be good.
Any answer you must begin with sources. Any answer that you are writing, right? And the second thing is the conceptual part of the answer. In a very simple, a single line you can write that they had different craft practices such as this and this. That's it, right? अब उसका अलग से इलाबोरेशन या एक्सटेंशन जरूरी नहीं है कि वो लोग रथ भी बनाते थे और चैरियट भी बनाते थे, वो लोग जो है कॉबलर भी थे, वो लोग ये भी करते थे, वो भी, उसको हाईलाइट करके फायदा नहीं. Getting my point, Alan? Okay, fine. Okay, a separate question can come on class, right? Which is related to private property. Which is related to private property. So at the end of the ancient India, we'll discuss this. Got my point? At the end of the ancient India, while doing the Gupta period, I'll discuss about the notion of private property, right? And here you got the point ki if it is about the Mahajanpada period, what are the points must be incorporated here? That I'll discuss there also, right? But I'll be leaving this question right now. Here I won't be going to discuss, I'm not going to discuss about the class. Do you thus understand this idea? And that might be important, right? So that could be asked in the examination, right? So this is the third topic, this is the second topic. Now population, not important. Script, they are not going to ask a separate question on script as such, right? Art and craft, definitely they can ask a question on art. That we need to cover, right? But that should be covered at the end, right? While once we finish this Mahajanpada period, and then we'll come to the, in fact after finishing this Mauryan period, we'll cover the art and craft, right? So that is.
Discussing about art and craft also, we should start with surplus, right?
Well, depends. If it is covering broadly the whole Mahajanpada period, you must begin with the answer. Must begin the answer with the surplus. If it is specialized, it has focused specially on suppose Mauryan art, right? And or sort of we can say Gupta art, right? Kusana art. In that case, there would be a different treatment, right? But once we are dealing with, there were so many other concepts are also there in the craft. It is not only about surplus, right? It is not only about the urbanization, right? At the same time, we can discuss about some other points which are related to the art practices, right? So that also we will discuss while discussing the art.
So many factors behind the flourishing of art.
Yes, of course, of course.
Interest of the king is one of the important things.
That is one of the important things. But apart from that, surplus, as I told you, the surplus are getting the urban centers, right? And urban centers somehow generate such kind of thing, right? But at the same time, you must discuss about the foreign influences. You must discuss about the king, because it is not only about the interest of the king. Sometimes it is becoming the compulsion of the king to develop such kind of thing, right? अशोका ने अगर पिलर्स बनवाए थे तो उसके पीछे सिर्फ यही नहीं था कि अशोका को बहुत इंटरेस्ट था पिलर्स में. They always tried to depict one thing through the art, that they had this power to mobilize the resources. Try to get my point. If Mughals are making Taj Mahal, it means that Mughals are very rich. And the enemies of Mughals will always consider Mughals as a rich power, and that is why they'll think twice, thrice, before attacking on them. People before revolting against the Mughals will think many times. And that is why whenever you'll find that the state is very powerful, it is being reflected even in art and culture, right? And that is why if it is about Mauryan, right, they had good pieces of art and architecture, stupas and their palaces. It is so unfortunate that these were made of the perishable material, and that is why not existing. But if you will refer the Megasthenes writing, you will find that they had very huge palaces, wooden palaces, right, and much better than the Mesopotamian, the Egyptian palisade, right? If it is about the Gupta Empire, you do know about their prosperity in terms of art, right? If it is about the Sultanate, right? They were also prosperous, but if we'll compare the Sultanate and the Mughal, you'll find Mughals were much better. Why? Because they had more, resources, they had more power. जब भी आप कुछ बनाते हैं तो दो चीजें चाहिए होती है उसके लिए, एक मैन पावर चाहिए होता है और दूसरा कैपिटल चाहिए, पैसे चाहिए होते हैं. तो ये दोनों चीज अगर आपके पास है, इसका मतलब आपके पास पावर बहुत है. तो आर्ट एंड कल्चर इज रिफ्लेक्टिंग सम अदर थिंग्स आल्सो, राइट? I hope you are getting, you can, connect this issue with the, temples which were created or built in the South India. It was more like identity. It was more like prosperity in the power of the state rather than any other thing. Somehow. So this is the another thing that we'll discuss separately. But so there were some conceptual things that we need to discuss here, right? So here we'll begin with this iron debate, right? And we'll discuss about this, right? And the private properties we'll discuss later. But one more thing that I didn't discuss directly here, but I hope you must be knowing about so many urban centers during this particular period. That should be discussed, first, but I am discussing that in last. So there were so many popular centers, urban centers, such as Magad is not a state. Magad is a state. Magad is not a center of. It was not supposed. Yes, Patliputra, Rajgiri, right? Avanti, Kasi, Kosal, right? Kurukshetra, right? Anga, Takshashila, Gandhar, right? So there were so many popular centers urban centers during this particular period, right? So somehow this is what we can discuss about urbanization. And any as such question which is coming on the second urbanization, so instead of discussing all bullshit sort of thing, you need to discuss about simply this. This phase had surplus, this phase had secondary economic activities, they had state societies, class, population, scripts, art and culture. Yes, they had lots of urban centers. This is finished. So you need to focus on the phenomena rather than facts.
Sir, central theme of the art and craft practices was the surplus. Only when there is surplus, the state is prosperous, and state is prosperous, king will patronize.
Of course, yeah.
And then we will write about various practices for an influence.
Just for the sake of example, we'll write something, right? If you have to, justify that the Mauryans are very powerful and that Mauryans are very powerful and it is even being reflected in their art and culture. So we'll just discuss about the way they created, surplus, the way they extended their empire, the way they were interacting with the other powers, right? And as a result of that, you'll find that they have created some better examples of art and culture. The pillars, the stupas, right? हो गया काम खत्म हो गया. So these are examples. The main idea is something of, अगर आप खूब स्तूपा को डिस्कस करते हैं, उसके पिलर्स का स्पेसिफिकेशन डिस्कस करते हैं, फायदा नहीं है उसको करके.
Sir, religion influence was also there in art and craft.
Of course, it is there. Yes, of course, you need to write about that also, but not always. Not always, but yes, there it is there, right? Okay, fine. So that is all about this second urbanization. That is all about the second urbanization, right? And as you can see that the formation of state itself is being part of the second urbanization, and that is why they did not discuss that point there, right? But if you need to discuss about the state societies, we have already extensively discussed about the state, right? So whenever you need to discuss about the state,
Sir, just in brief, please explain what is the class concept which you will deal with when sitting in the show.
बैठने से समझ में नहीं आया क्या?
No, sir. Just,
What concept you did not get it? Tell me once.
sir, concept of class itself.
Hmm.
I did not understand that.
I just told you, look, there might be different kind of stratification in the society, right? There might be the social hierarchy in the society, there might be economic hierarchy in the society, right? There are two things, right? Once you say about the class hierarchy, right? Or once you say about the sort of social hierarchy, what did I tell you? That it is very much, it is not that much possible that if it is about social or the religious hierarchy, right? People are somehow, bound to that hierarchy, and normally they did not or they do not respond against the social or the religious hierarchy, right? Because आपने सुना होगा कि जब भी बोलते हैं कि इसको हम जात बहिष्कृत करेंगे, ठीक है, कास्ट से हम इसको बाहर करेंगे, तो वो बहुत बड़ी पनिशमेंट हो जाती है, आप सबको पता है, ठीक है. और यहाँ पे मैंने आपको आई जस्ट गिव यू द एग्जांपल ऑफ दैट इन अ स्टोरी ऑफ प्रेमचंद, ठीक है, सदगति, that somehow your own community is not going to support you if you are going to raise your voice against the hierarchy or religious hierarchy, right? But that idea is not implied in the class concept, right? If it is about class, so mostly there is a class which is exploiting the another class, right? And there you'll find a sort of solidarity, right, among the exploited class and even the class which is exploiting. Got my point? So if it is about, and in India there was another thing I told you, that things are slightly weak, because the way you'll find the class hierarchy, right, in the same fashion you'll find the caste hierarchy, right? And that is where sometimes the class hierarchy is hidden, right? But here in the Mahajanpada period, I think that class hierarchy is coming very clearly. There is a difference, there is a layer of class that could be seen. There are some big merchants, there are some big landholders, right? Gahapati. The Gahapati term was not used for those who are holding small pieces of land. Gahapati must be used for those people who are holding huge amount of land. Cities are not the small businessmen, right? Cities are basically the big businessmen, right? And in fact, if cities were the big businessmen, it means that there must be some people who are holding small businesses or holding small amount of land, right? In the case of Gahapati, but the Gahapati term was not used for them. So somehow you'll find a class hierarchy, right? So whenever you find the class hierarchy, the society, such societies always has tension. Class hierarchy में tension तय, ठीक है? And you need someone to remove such kind of tensions from society, right? So you have to remove such kind of tensions from the society, and only one particular section can do it, that is king, right? And somehow this is what, there are two things that you need to remember for the state formation during this particular period. That the first, it is about the hierarchy of the system or class, right? The first thing. And hierarchy somehow creates tension, and because of what, state is required, right? And the second thing I just told you, much earlier, that whenever you do talk about the urban civilization, right? The urban civilizations always require state societies, because the urban civilizations could not exist because without the state societies, because they are the people controlling the economic activities. And that's the reason that initially you'll find that the state had some to some extent, state has intervention in the economy. I hope you have studied about Mauryan. I hope you remember the Mauryans, right? Mauryans were trying to regulate the economy. I hope you might have heard about the references in Arthashastra. अगर नहीं पढ़ा है तो अभी जान लीजिए, ठीक है? State का रोल ज्यादा है economy में, but gradually economy अलग होती जाती है. कब? When economy itself became much consolidated, right, and much organized, and then without the intervention of the function, it was being regulated by the market only, right? But initially that kind of intervention was required, right? And that is, I'll find that during this particular period, definitely state was required. So somehow it was related to the hierarchy in the economy, and at the same time the urbanization, right? So if it is urbanization, so they needed someone who could regulate such kind of things, right? And apart from that, all those other angles such as security, judicial services, right? These all, private property, we have already discussed all those points. So if all those phenomena are present, if all those features are present in society, it means that there would be a requirement of the state society. And that is why we will find that now the Janpada, the idea of Janpadas are becoming more and more consolidated, and with that what is happening? Later on the concept of Mahajanpadas are coming. This is the period when you will find that in the northwest there were two Mahajanpadas, and these were northwest. North Takshila was the capital of Gandhar. और कौन था दूसरा? कौशल वहां कहां से चला? पढ़ के आने के लिए मैंने बोला था आप लोगों को, कैसे भूल गए? गांधार का कैपिटल था तक्षशिला. दूसरा कौन है? सबसे साउथ में कौन है? नहीं है. बंदी का कैपिटल है उज्जैन. कौशल तो एकदम नेपाल के उसमें on the foothills of the Himalaya. फिर क्या पढ़ के आए आप लोग? अब मैं ये भी बताऊं कि कहाँ पे कौन कौन सा वो है? नहीं सर, नेपाल बॉर्डर. सो बर्थ प्लेस ऑफ ये मतलब इसका मतलब you need to go once the chapter, right? So okay, in tomorrow's class we'll come after reading that and we'll begin with this here. And now I'll be keep on dictating those important sections, such as we'll begin with the iron idea, the iron conflict or the iron debate, and in the same way I'll just pick up the issues and I'll keep on dictating you, and of course meanwhile I'll just keep on making you understand also, right? So tomorrow we'll finish this, second urbanization definitely will finish, right? And hopefully state also, because there are so many, very less controversies regarding state. Republics, oligarchies, right? This is the only controversy in the state, and that's the only question which they are going to ask, right? So in that we'll cover, right? So okay, so we'll finish the state and state system, and then second urbanization, and day after tomorrow we'll begin with religious revelation, right? That will take some 1 or 2 classes, right? But before that, again you need to come after reading that chapter, because again I'm not going to discuss about ये अष्टांगिका मार्ग है, इसमें ये 8 चीजें हैं, ठीक है, वो सब मैं डिस्कस नहीं करूंगा. तो वो सब आपको पता होना चाहिए. व्हाट इज दिस ये चतुरार्य सत्यानी, 4 noble truth, what is this 8-fold path, what is this 3 ratna, what is this panch mahavrata. I'm not going to discuss. What we are going to discuss, the question that could be asked in the mains examination, right? So you come after reading those kind of things, reasons for the success, reasons for the failures, right? The divisions and some other things. So we are going to discuss in that way. So please come after reading tomorrow in a pretty well manner the notes as well as NCRT for the Mahajanpadas period, because tomorrow we'll finish it.